Yeah, dude, I love this remix. It's so good. And
Thanks,
having
dude.
heard the original, I can already hear that it's like way faster. And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I love the drums especially. It's just all the percussive elements are like super detailed and
Thanks,
sophisticated.
man.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the remix. Also,
Yeah.
before you even tell me about the remix, like I feel like it's probably super hard to remix a production that you did because you were so close to that production as like the producer, right? Like, how do you step back and become the remixer?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have a good answer so much as I don't know. I just treated it like it was something I never heard before, and building it into a genre that I do a lot of, kind of like future bassy, poppy stuff. That song was her original version. Orion, just the song itself was so not that it wasn't like. Just speeding it up was enough for my brain to start going, oh, okay, this is a different song. You know what I mean? Even just that little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And turning it into something. And it took on a really different energy. A lot of remixes, you speed things up. Sometimes you slow it down in an odd case. But I think I kept the same key too. I didn't hear any formant shifting in I'm pretty sure I kept it in the same key. But yeah, man, the drum sound design, the synth sound design, all that stuff I did with a ton of different things, kicks and snares and stuff that I've made from, even things from various little projects that I've worked on, like some of those Let's See If This Sounds Good videos and whatnot. And
some of those kicks and snares.
The kicks and snares and stuff. Yeah, man. I don't know if you have all those packs, but I got to give them to you if you don't.
You sent me those packs. Yeah, I got them.
Sick.
Yes, super cool stuff. Everyone should go check them out.
And since you used a lot of Serum, a lot of honestly, you know what I used a lot of this because I had just gotten back into it. I used a lot of Reason on this song.
Huh?
Reason was I started off on Reason back in the day, like we talked about last time.
It's like a DAW, right?
Yeah, right. But it has a plugin version of it you can open as a plugin in various VST and AAX and AU version. You can open Reason as a plugin and then just use its synthesizers and effects and other kinds of stuff and route through it. And I used a lot of that, and I used one of its new synths. I think it was called Euro something. One of the newer. It may not be new to Reason itself, but it's new in comparison to when I used to use Reason when I opened it now. And I used a lot of that, and that's a wavetable synth. It's just Reason's brand of it, and a lot of filtering, a lot of rhythmic effects. Oh gosh, what else? Rhythmic effects like cool stops and like beats restarting in places you wouldn't assume them to naturally if you're following a groove, but that's kind of part of the genre as well, is to kind of do some of those psych out things that leave the listener like, whoa, that kind of vibe.
Like the kick starts on like the 3.
Yeah, or something. Or
randomly.
Or like the 2 and. Yeah, like that's like restarting a beat, like 1 out, 2 and, then you're back in, like, you know what I mean? So that kind of stuff, and it's a great track, man. It did pretty well. We were happy with its spread, and
I had some cool like growly but rhythmic kind of bass stuff. What did you do there?
Oh yeah, that was, man. Honestly, it's honestly all sound design is like doing all the same kind of shit with just like different things. That was a lot of filtering. That was a lot of unison, and some very interesting amplitude modulation that ends up sounding like distortion that I learned from watching YouTube stuff that I've modified since to kind of fit the way I want it to sound. And it's just that idea of like creating harmonics and stuff below what the usual fundamental is by cutting it at half the rate of the note that you're playing. And you can do that by key tracking and then key tracking modulators, using key tracking modulators to the sound so that it cuts it in a certain manner, and using an LFO to define the shape of the cut that's repeated over and over and over and over. And just getting like, you can get kind of a gravelly sound by chopping things up really fast at the speed at which the note is. So it's like you do it in key with the note. Yeah.
Oh, it's like a hyper tremolo kind of thing.
Yeah, like a really fast effectively. Yeah. That's effectively what amplitude modulation is. It's volume modulation really fast.
Cool.
Yeah. Where frequency modulation is the act of imprinting onto a wave the characteristics of another wave, and sometimes that causes foldback distortion and harmonic like accentuation up or down the harmonic scale, or sometimes that completely just like if you're adding noise to a saw wave or to a sine wave, it kind of just sounds like noise and a sine wave. Unless you really crank it, then it gets like screechy and does other weird stuff. So it's like,
man,
yeah,
got to dig deeper. Like I feel like I need to learn a lot more before I could ask you about this stuff. But
it's cool, man.
How much of when you're doing like a remix, like such as this one, how much of it is like brand new sound design versus like things you've already designed and then maybe tweak a little bit? Like how customized is it?
That's a good question. So for certain like growl basses and other dubsteppy stuff that I do, it's more about changing the pattern of what the growl or what is doing to fit the rhythmic elements of the song, whatever the song is, as opposed to just creating something new every single time. I do a lot of both, but I find the easiest and like most efficient is just taking sounds and modifying them even more and changing the pattern of how the rhythmic element of it to create the kind of almost a new sound. And then a lot of my patches and things that I make, I spend a lot of time making sure the macros on like the left side of Serum and on the kind of middle left side of Anit 2, and they're at the top on Faceplant, all do really interesting shit. So that it's like, or really functional things, like even something as simple as like, I want this sound wider. Cool. Like instead of having to go and figure out and do that stuff, there's a knob that says wide, and you just turn it and you get it's wider.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, so even like I build in some mixing stuff and creative mixing techniques into what I'm doing, aside from like, oh, this will really distort it even more, or this will change the tone completely by cycling through the wavetable like in a different manner, or that kind of stuff. So they're really functional for like resampling, which is effectively the act of like getting a sound you like, getting it to do a couple cool shit, then change a little bit and just reprint it. Change a little bit, reprint it. Change a little bit, reprint it. And you can get a bunch of different, that's part of what builds that kind of really glitchy, hard cut dubsteppy style, is just resampling by just changing things a little bit and and then like cutting things so that it's just, you've used one patch, but you've gotten like 12 different cuts out of it. And you can just like just stick those together and all that. But then I've got a bunch of patches and you can do that with all of them. So you have like almost, I wouldn't say infinite, but effectively infinite like source of just resampling stuff. And that's more in like the kind of growl and rhythm basses and stuff like that you can really lean into that technique. It's less common with like probably pads and stuff, where it's more of a swelling stuff like that kind of thing. But even those, I build in some interesting things where you can turn it from like a pluck to a pad, and it maintains some of like, which is a drastic shift and requires a lot of like automation to make that just one knob do all that well. But like you can get like a lot of stuff that I make, you can get like 2 or 3 different functions out of it at just one patch.
Couldn't you just do that by adjusting the attack, of the, just the ASD, AD?
Man, attack, filters, decays, releases, sustains, all that stuff has got to shift at a certain point so that it functions like a usable pad. Isn't just like, oh, this is like a pluck that kind of feels like a pad. It's like, I want it to actually feel like a different instrument by the time you've moved around some knobs. And now some things that I make are very drastic in all their modulations, and some things are not. Not everything needs to be this grandiose morphing fucking whatever. It's just, I don't know, I take a lot of pride in making the stuff that I do really functional, really cool, and multi-use. So
nice.
Yeah, man.
So I guess when you're doing remixes, you're usually starting off with one of the things that you've made even, and and just
these
taking
days,
it from there.
Certainly in the beginning of doing this, preset city. That's
now that you have more,
exactly.
I feel like maybe your whole time situation of like taking too long to do these patches and stuff, it's gonna get faster the more you do it, right?
It's gonna get faster, and it's paying off in that there's a certain amount of I guess pride, for lack of a better term, one can get from, designing every element of what the person is hearing for the most part. Like, I didn't design if I'm doing like a thing with guitars in it, I didn't decide the amp sim that I'm using. You know what I mean? It's like, it is what it is in that regard. But using the tools you have to design every individual element of what you're making, there's a really cool, it's like every bit of this is something that I brought from the ground up. And not like I used another preset and tweaked it. It's like, no, that was a sine wave when I started with it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the absolute basic pure tone. And then ended up
cool.
And ended up into something. Yeah.
And do you usually, when you're building these sounds from the ground up, are you trying to reference anything? Are you trying to like base it off of anything else, or it's just like complete imagination?
Sometimes I will try to see how well I can mimic something, which turns out pretty well, more often than not. And it's that same ideology of what we discussed last time with like, well, how do you learn a new genre? Well, bring that song into your session and start trying to make a song just like it, but just use your own chord progressions. And where's the kicks come in? Where do the snares come in? Where are the hi-hats? Where's the synth? All that stuff we discussed last time of just rebuilding the entirety of a song. It's the same concept with sound design. It's like, now that requires a little more, with the sound design stuff, requires a little more like intense critical listening and knowing where to reach on a synth to grab something to make it sound similar to what you're hearing. Because that's a little more esoteric than just like marking where drums come in or marking where, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it sounds like you have like a vocal tone in your head, and how am I going to use this EQ and compressor, and which reverb and delay am I going to use to make it sound like this idea I have in my head?
It's the same concept. It's just where do you reach for those tools on a synth? You know?
Right.
Yeah. If I want to make this kind of neuro-bassy kind of thing, well, that's usually a lot of FM modulation. So I know that now because I know what FM modulation sounds like in the context of some of the more simple basses and stuff that are just like sine waves, triangle waves, and various other things, and how you modulate those through. And I knew that now, but I didn't know that. I would have never guessed, in the past. That's how, but it's like with anything, like you wouldn't have guessed how you were supposed to use a compressor, It's like once you can hear it.
No idea what it is before you've used it.
Right, exact same concept. Nothing new, just being applied to the more nitty gritty of the sound design stuff. So,
dude, you should do like YouTube videos where you kind of show people how you build a sound from the ground up.
I will, and I have to a certain degree, not so much with synthesis, but with like some of the like let's see if it sounds good videos. I really just have that one kind of tutorial that I did, but I think about doing that, man. But if I'm being honest, there's so much of that out there. It's like you don't need one more guy. This fucking guy. He's like, you could look it up. You could look up a million of them.
This fucking guy
to teach you how to do stuff. And it's like, not that I don't think what I have to say is cool, or maybe I think of it in a slightly different way. Maybe, I don't know. But it's just like, there's so much of that out there. Trying to be original is difficult because there's even people that do it that are funny about it, and not only are they also funny, they're also way fucking better than me. So it's like
I hear you, man.
It's just like they got it. You guys got it. It's fine. I'm just gonna keep making
that corner
stuff.
of the internet has been captured.
Right.
Well, then, so I guess in terms of like what makes you unique, what would be the thing that
I like how I spend a lot of time on making things multifunctional, that thing that I just talked about. You don't see a ton of that in some of the presets and stuff that you buy or whatever. As a matter of fact, you don't even, in a lot of preset packs and stuff that you buy for various synths, you don't see any macro destinations being messed with at all. A lot of times people have just built a sound, and that is what it is. And it's up to you.
You're just expected to use it, yeah.
Right, use it in some, and I'm like, well, hang on. This is a great sound, but these people may not need it to do this all the time. What if I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, make it useful in other capacities for them? So instead of those that aren't that hard up to try to figure out the nitty gritty of the sound design, they can just turn a macro. That's what they're for, is to make this part easy.